designed, we set it up in 2007. The simple mandate was we have these extraordinary individuals across the fields of athletics, music, culture, arts, even esports, and they're all characterized by being exceptionally good at what they do. And for us, the program was designed and the mandate was very clear. Can you help them take that next step? They come to us with these dreams, these visions, they naturally push the edge of what they're doing. And we were set with the task of setting up a system of processes and models to enable them and help them support that trajectory. So very clearly, early in the program, we realized we had to look at performance in a very unique way. And the way we like to describe it is we're sort of talent agnostic. We don't care what you're good at. We want to know how you got there and what you do to stay there. So we set about researching both across the community that we have access to, partnerships with the government, DoD, defence and business, and just asking people the fundamental question through both interview and science, what is it about them that makes them tick? Why do they perform at the very best? What is it, the natural skill set they bring to the table, and what can we challenge them and augment them with to improve on that? So I must say very clearly, they are already very, very good. So this is a talk around people who are exceptional and what we're trying to do to understand and learn from them. And through that learning, not only help each one of them improve, but potentially share that with a greater community. So this is our framework. Again, we don't care what you're good at, we're interested in it, and we just love having these conversations. Through that process and over the years, we had to refine a model, because you can imagine there's a lot of information out there. So we decided if we could frame it up in a model that gives us some context and as a proxy for us to understand, organize, and then share, that will help us take a step forward. This is very generic. It looks at basically the process of just sharing how we do the process more than anything. It looks at, the physical side of the parameters, the psychological side, the medical side, and we get into things like life skills and creativity and spirituality. I could talk about this all day, but I figured in the 30 minutes I want to get right to the juice. So this is one of the processes that we focus heavily on. This is what we're all blessed or cursed with. It's the flight or fight response. And for those of you who aren't familiar with it, it basically says you challenge a person incrementally. They typically step up to a point where they will approve or achieve optimal performance. Once you push past that point, so once the challenge exceeds the level of preparation, something else starts to happen and performance decreases. So our whole mandate and our area of fascination I want to share with you today is that area to the top right of the curve. That's where we want to play. That's where we want to understand. When you're in a situation, whether you're business, sport, whatever, those high stakes moments where everything's on the line and you have to make that critical choice, how do we improve that time? So there's a couple of ways of handling it, and I'll share with you a couple. Occasionally when we're running our training camps, we go out and do things like bungee jump with the crew and everything just to see how people respond to this space. And this is one example of what it looks like.
Bungee New Zealand. Here we go. Oh my God. Oh my God. Oh my God. Oh my God.
You would argue that his capacity for critical decision making is somewhat impaired at that moment. And I beat him up all the time, I have to apologise. But the reality is that's when it counts. So to take a look at someone who's, let's say, better prepared for that moment, this is a guy, JT Holmes, extraordinary. This is the north face of the Eiger. And it's a long clip, I apologise, about 2 minutes, but compare and contrast in your own time.
We were in a helicopter following JT up to the top. It was so small there, the size of like 2 ping pong tables.
The helicopter skids basically just kind of go into the side of the mountain.
All of a sudden you hear, he's gonna go, and they throw up his kite and down JT goes.
It's not an insignificant thing to go down
I saw
this
these
mountain,
majestic turns that he made. I'm thrilled because Martin Bavler, the Cineflex guy in the front seat, is taking these pictures, and JT never goes out of frame. And then he hits the snowfield and starts to ski at 40 miles an hour. And I said, oh my God, it doesn't fall.
Cut away, shoot.
Comes right to the edge of the mountain, and right off the top of the mountain. Next thing I hear, he made it.
Slightly
Safe
different.
and sound.
I was so happy for him.
Holy smokes.
What amazed me is after doing this run down the Eiger, he did it again.
And I said, why do you want to do it again? He said, conditions are perfect. We're waiting for a long time. I just want to do it again.
Because he did it the first time doesn't mean he was going to make it the second time. Started off fine. Went down the mountain. Everything's going great. And he went over his little man-made ramp. And I see him flying in the air. And I see one ski go, but I don't see a second one.
He couldn't jettison one of his skis. One of his skis got stuck.
This was death-defying. If that ski did not come off, he would have died.
He had about 2 seconds, maybe, where he couldn't get it off. You know, I'm trying to film this, but inside your heart's like going, oh, Jesus, come on.
Thankfully, he was able to get that ski unstuck, and it flew away, and he continued with his free fall, and then he deployed his parachute and floated safely down.
It was
Easy day. So that's the difference. He had about 2 seconds there with what happens if you're not familiar with the sport. If one ski doesn't release, it'll spin you. You can't deploy your chute. It's over. So he had 2 seconds to assess what was going on, recognize the problem, have the wherewithal to reach down, find the strap and deploy, and then wingsuit and then deploy the chute. So those are the moments that we are passionate about understanding, amongst many others, but these are the ones that really are driving us. These are these crux moments that really drive a lot of the programming we do. And in order to help us enable to train to those moments and prepare people for that, and again, it's all relative. I want to make that very clear. You as an individual have your own limits and your own challenges, your own boundaries. Everyone's different. When you hit that edge, that's the moment we want to prepare you for. So we came up with this model of looking at perceived risk and actual risk. And it very simply captures the idea that some people, like JT potentially, hates public speaking, but will do that. So his perception of being up here is more terrifying than doing that, versus some of you in the audience, it's probably the other way around, I'd imagine. So the progression we take is we look for opportunities to create space where the perception of risk is high. And remember, that's a physiological response. So as you perceive it to be high, your body will respond naturally in kind. And we shift you across that white line to get you out to the right, the yellow point, where your risk is high, but you're prepared adequately to undertake that risk and the performance takes care of itself. You go the other way, where the risk is really high, but I've got this, that's when people get hurt or embarrassed, or a combination of the both usually. So what does that look like? So I want to share with you the part of the program that we developed, which is many years in the evolution. And these were kind of like different programs that we had stacked over the years that we ran independently, and we decided, why don't we just push them all together for a week? So it was called Performing Under Pressure because essentially that's what we were challenging people with. Very quickly, I want to make sure you understand, we just don't throw people in there and hope they're okay. We train and prepare them every day. And part of the process in this course is some neurofeedback, but also in this case, mindfulness work. So they get coached up every morning on ways to control their thoughts and mind and the rest of that process. We then had a program which we developed for many years, which was our big wave safety program, which teaches people to hold their breath for extended periods, which obviously for our big wave surfers has a very functional use. But for everybody, it's a powerful program to go through. And typically in about 3-4 days, we get you from 0 at 40, 30-second breath hold to about 4.5 minutes, up to 7 minutes for some people. And that's down to 100 feet to 120 feet dive as well. We have, in this particular camp we ran, challenges based around sort of bomb disposal, like ordnance disposal. So we would just throw these, and this was the middle of the cocktail party on the first night. So we got a volunteer, we put a booby trap, fake bomb on her, and the boys were just thrown in the mix and had to defuse the bomb real time. So they're getting challenged all the time, they're never off. We have a great partnership with Cirque du Soleil. We really focus on the emotional challenges here and the work they do to take athlete to artist is the model they call. And we challenge the athletes with that, and I'll give you an example of that in a minute. And at the end, just some fun. Out there, motorsports, charging around a track with a race car is a great way to get people to wrap the the meeting up, the program, and get the athletes where we need them to be. So what does it look like? Well, it's funny because the emotional challenges, I think, are obviously the ones most people don't rate. They're always prepared for us to kick the hell out of them physically, but the emotional stuff seems to be where we get the most and the most powerful response from. So this is what this is like. Cirque du Soleil run a process where you just explore emotions. 0 to 10 on a factor, say, of anger or happiness, or crying to completely sad to completely happy. Either way it works. And you'll see what it looks like here, and you'll see Will in the middle of his element.
These are the switch. These are extremes. Laughing and crying.
Like we were saying, find your place and find your moment that triggers that emotion and just push it and push it and push it. And then switch, okay? All right, cry, guys, cry.
Actually getting up in front of a crowd and really letting go and actually showing emotions, laughing and crying and jumping around, screaming, all these energy exercises and all these different things. I feel like that to me was by far the hardest thing ever.
Switch, laugh! That was close, man!
I really felt like I was really self-connected with myself and my energy was balanced and everything was aligned.
Many of the athletes said that experience was far tougher than the morning with the... So that, again, a proxy for pushing the perception of risk high, getting up and exposing yourself in front of a room, the challenges that you feel, the perception of being sort of embarrassed, that really asks you to dig deep in terms of drawing on those talents and those skills to manage your emotions, manage and control that space. And, you know, if that guy was, you know, doing a day job in the office and he said it was the toughest day of his life, you'd sort of say, well, maybe that's great, but this is what his day job looks like. So the perception of it is all that counts really in this case. And what I love about that idea is that it opens up the opportunity for all of us. But to take it another step, you know, a primal fear, something that really gets to the juice of all this, is something that we like to focus on. And being eaten or being attacked by an animal is a primal fear. So we set up this next little iteration. And again, I'll premise it with, we trained them, we prepared them, we coached them. And we had some safeties in place, which obviously they didn't know about, but this is what this looks like.
For us, fear is not a bad thing. It's actually a tool, it's a trigger. It brings you up, and in many cases you need to be brought up to get ready to do what it is you're about to do.
I knew I was scared of snakes, but I've never actually put myself in a position where I had to be near them.
Remember the two things: slow movements, low stress.
At first, I was doing my deep breaths, and I almost didn't really sink in what I was doing. Apparently, I kind of charged. Everyone else was taking their time, and I just wanted to get through there. My heart rate went from sitting down beforehand at 37 to 170 while I was just crawling in there. Learning to face that kind of primal fear and having the experience of feeling probably the most fear I've felt and overcoming it, and how amazing that feels afterwards just gives us the confidence to do that again and again.
So a bit of fun and games, but the reality is these challenges are designed very specifically to push them past that edge. And when people are world class, this is an important thing to remember, when people are top of their game, it's very hard to push them in that space. They've either seen it before, they're pretty comfortable in that world. We can't find an 80-foot wave very often to throw them into the practice. So shifting and dislocating expectations into these very uncommon and out-of-the-box experiences, or in the box to be precise in this case, challenges them in a way they've never seen before, but it also, their ego's left away, they don't mind because they're not tied to how they succeed or don't not succeed in this space. We do a lot of science, so there's a lot of other training that goes on, so I don't want to be known as the snake guy walking out of here, but there's a lot of metrics, and the first year we spent a lot of time looking at a lot of blood markers, venous blood draws, saliva draws, cortisol, alpha amylase, and the reality is we didn't really see anything that tracked or discriminated across this group in terms of success or not success in the performance. But remember, they're a very elite subset. I'm not talking about average to good, there's something there, but from good to great, or whatever you want to call that, that's where those metrics don't hold much weight. We got down to genetics, we looked at telomere length, and you can see there's some patterns there. The blue are the high performers, the reds are people like me, so a good benchmark. There's something potentially there, but again, nothing discriminatory or causal, which forced us in the second year, we just reran the program a few months ago, to go back to some more psychometric evaluations and try and unpeel that onion a little bit. And we looked at things like the classic grit, resilience, empathy, social intelligence, emotional IQ. And guess what? One's a world-class triathlete, one's a recent Olympic medalist, and one's JT. Can anyone pick? And JT was the guy that jumped off the Eiger earlier on. So again, we see this extraordinary diversity of responses and talents and makeup. So again, what does that speak to? I think it speaks to the opportunity of individualization, which is exactly where we play in this space. One thing we do know, we have done longer programs over an extended period of time, about 10 days, a bit more physically demanding, and we do see a shift in pre and post FRMIs. So even though we don't understand exactly what's happening, we can measure a change, and if you ask people like Will, they do say things shifted. Perception changed. It may only last a few weeks or months. So something's going on. Unfortunately, the fidelity of the assessments we're looking at hasn't quite narrowed it down to a point where we can fine-tune it. So unfortunately, we'll keep using boxes of snakes until we figure that out. But what we do know is that while the world is busy measuring and the wearables are trying to capture all the pieces on the right, the physical and some of the emotional, creativity, the constructs around life skills or spirituality, this is where the big wins remain to be had. This is what we call measuring what can't be measured. We all understand when we walk into these world-class facilities, we don't see things like heart rate variability was X on the wall. What do we see? Loyalty, trust, humility, passion, grace. These are the things that adorn all those elite facilities that we work in, but they're the hardest to construct around. But they're also the things we know when we see them, and we value them as important. So we thought about it in terms of our model. If we can put a framework around these more abstract constructs, if we can take something like creativity, people who are the best in the world, no matter what they do, redefine that space. But can you train and improve that? Well, we took a step back and said, can we just elevate the conversation in a way or expose the conversation in a way that allows people to participate in this so that we can learn as much as we possibly can around it? So we set around with a model. We called it hackingcreativity.com, and it literally was a very fundamental process. And this was 5 years ago, so it's pretty dated now. And I love that you had the early picture of Rodney Mullen, because that's Rodney Mullen as he looks today. And he just performed another trick at 50 that's never been done before, by the way, so he still skates. But we took the machine, it says AI, that's not true at the case. That was the hope, but we literally just machine read about 15,000 articles on the process of creativity. But we all know that the research tells you one thing and the experts tell you another in the field, the practitioners. So we interviewed as many as we could get our hands on, and we got to about 500 people in the creative space across all domains, not just arts and music, but we went science, technology, sport, you name it. You were creative or recognized as a thought leader. We tried to interview and capture your IP. And then we asked the world to participate on the platform, and we have about 10,000 people do that. And we figured maybe in the middle of that something pops to give us something to work with in this space. Because if we can get creativity in some sort of level of understanding for us in terms of a training envelope, what could we then put in courage, put in risk-taking, put in, again, grace or humility, these things that are important to us, but we still can't get our heads around. So just to give you a quick look at what that framed up like, that's the visualization. It's still live, it just sits there quietly. That's the visualization of the literature review, which again, you can zoom in. It's only 15 years because we just ran out of basically time and money. So we just captured about 15 years of it. It's just the concept was more important than the actual numbers. Each node, if you click on it, gives you an abstract, and they use some pretty powerful back-end analytics. The Vibrant Data Group, the startup here in San Fran, sort of take principles carned out in the sort of ecological biology space and understanding biological systems and applied it to this. So those articles are all there just as a tool. People, we hope, can look at it and sort of maybe look at links and sites and things like that. We then interviewed or asked the creators, we suppose. So there's Ronnie Young and there's Rodney now, and he's an extraordinary individual. And that sort of expression you see captured there and the things that inspire him creatively aren't what we read in the research. They're both important, but we didn't want to judge one or the other. And then, as I said, after we got through the 500, we opened it up on a slightly simplified platform. There's about 10,000 people, and it just grows as people play with it. Our hope is to increase this a little bit and make the site a little bit more friendly. But the concept's there. Framework around an abstract topic to give us some leverage point to work on, train to, and execute against. It doesn't have to be right, it just gives us something, a little bit more insight, and with insight we have power. One of the most powerful things, which is exactly what we see in the physiological world, two rocket scientists, literally, both employed in various institutions around the country, who both create very, very differently. This idea that the top 5 habits of creative people, and that's what you've got to do kind of thing, which obviously sells well, But when we got down to it, we broke it out on about a dozen different profiles. People create this way, that way, which again is empowering for us. At the top of the game, there's no one path to success, but just capturing a little bit gave us some insight. The other thing that was really important was that we realized the programming and training we'd been doing to sort of challenge people to take risk and manage risk. Courage is what it takes to be creative. That's a theme that came over and over again. Real courage to put yourself out there and put your ideas in front of people. But people don't talk about that as often, or at least in our world. So these were two quick things. There's a whole mess more that will be pushed out and published in the next couple of months. So I hope that gives you a little bit of an insight into our world. I chose a couple of fun things to share with you today to sort of get the point across. But there's obviously a serious body of work being done across the country in human optimization and what that means. What gets us excited is this next step. And again, Vivian, thank you for priming it so well. Is when we look at mastery as a proxy for us to manage or look to understand elite performance, what happens when these people or these machines get involved? When the machine becomes a master, what does that mean for us and people in our field? And I think you've seen the patterns and trends, and this is by no means an exponential talk, but you're pretty probably familiar with Michael Lewis and Moneyball. That was the sort of modernization or the democratization of sports statistics for everybody. If you watch any of the elite sports now, you see the machine learning. I hate to use that term because I don't really know what it means, but they've said it when they've talked about this slide before. But some system of computing that does this and analyzes player performance real time, and that's just being driven heavily by the broadcast community. Then you have people like us looking at the science of what the performers look like, maybe measuring heart rates and variabilities and other sorts of metrics, things like that, so the measurable market. So these are all painting a very static picture, or dynamic picture, I should say, of what it looks like to be an elite performer under one context. But again, there's nothing in there that really discriminates that we can train to. What's very interesting is we're seeing, and this has been driven a lot by the marketing and the security communities, is the semantic analysis of social to do the psychological profiling that we typically do through self-report. So recruiting in the future for us is shifting potentially from, hey, come in, do the interview, blah, 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 that'll always be there, but hey, by the way, we're going to look at your social and see what sort of patterns and trends you make there. And you remember that some of these talents they're talking about, they spend a lot of money on. Interestingly, the AI for us in terms of our world, this is a recent photo done of an Air Force simulator, some more modern, one of the more modern iterations. He's a 30, 40-year veteran of simulating training in combat environments. He's also a combat fighter pilot, and that's his response. And this is, by the way, this is done on, I was told, a $50 computer, this process now. So the idea that the machine is now becoming a training tool, which it has been for a while, but it's now getting to the point where he's basically, his interview was, I used to be able to game it. I could figure out how to get around. This thing got me every time now. And when I'm done, I'm exhausted, mentally depleted. And then taking that a step further, the people at Hughes Research Lab taking a similar simulator, but now mapping the brain patterns of elite performers and then neurally stimulating that back into the novices and seeing a rapid acceleration in their training. So the machine measuring what you're doing through the cranial transformers, and then pushing that back in based on the pattern that they see as marking an expert performer. Now that's going to open up all sorts of worlds of opportunities. And then as we saw earlier on, I think, the machine is also getting really good at understanding more about us as humans. Now this is where it gets really interesting. The work being done on facial recognition and more of the micro-expression stuff, because as you see where I'm leading with all this, where we've gone from this idea of the information or the infographics or the data being presented to us as coaches on how to help the people we're training get better, we're starting to see this evolution of the machine being able to correspondingly look at you with the eye of a great coach. A great coach can see you and see how Will's performing in that space and understand that he's probably hitting his limits, and before we psychologically cripple him, we pull him back a little bit and give him a bit of a break, and we manage that whole process. That's the art of coaching. And we're starting to see signs that this is going to become a reality beyond what we ever expected. And Santosh Milan up at Honeywell Labs, this is a very powerful little piece of information he just recently published. He's looking at helicopter pilots, and the 3 points horizontally are easy program of landing on a dry summer day, no wind. moderate landing, a bit of wind, unpredictable conditions, and horrific storm-based landing for helicopters. And these are expert pilots. And if you ask them how they did, what you typically hear, that was good. Good people always say that was easy. It wasn't that hard. The machine, looking at metrics within the EEG signal, actually can discriminate the level of cognitive load that the person's receiving. So what does this all mean for us? And what I'm sort of passionate about understanding now is bringing that to life in the real time. If the machine can now take on aspects of a coach or a mentor, it can free you up as a teacher of a classroom of kids to know that certain people in the room are struggling with that level of information. They're beyond that point in the stress curve. You can start to manage the information delivered to them, and you're back at this point now where you're getting things as you need them appropriate to your level of challenge. You don't improve unless you're challenged. But if you challenge too much, you see what happens. You end up like our boy Spongy jumping earlier on. The whole system shuts down. So I obviously, because it's San Fran, I picked Steve Kerr. The assistant coach idea for us is something that's really got ears and people talking in our field. I don't think it's going to be the head coach quite yet, but and you can see by the powerful graphics we have here how much work was put into this. But the reality is, I ran out of budget 3 slides ago. We kind of get this in proxy now anyway, don't we? They go off the field, the head coach, and he sits down with the statisticians and the analysts and comes back. And now the wearables will tell us that the certain hamstring's starting to get a little tired and now that we maybe should pull them off. Then the machine can probably tell that the person's having a bad day. One of the best coaches I've ever worked with used to say the best reading of how a team's going to do today is watch how much they're talking when they come into the locker room. All those cues and signals that the machine can assist us in understanding allows us then to do what? What's the next step? Well, for us, I agree 100% with Vivian's work. The opportunity for optimizing humans is at a breaking point. We're going to see an accelerated space here where humans is the new tech. Where we're focused heavily on the science and the technologies, the people in the equation are going to require equally as heavy investment and attention. So the opportunity to take this and do extraordinary things in this next phase of whatever our evolution looks like is powerful. But more importantly, it's wonderful to have had the experience of being coached or mentored by someone in your field who really trusts and understands you and knows what you're about. If any of you have had that experience, it's life-changing. Unfortunately, not everyone gets to practice under people like Steve, but these systems could help scale this construct for us now. And if you're an emotional equivalent of a box of rocks, but you can get a little hint from your app that tells you that people in the boardroom aren't probably paying attention to you anymore, that's a good thing. Some people are nodding, yeah, they've been there. So for us, that idea of scaling up, and then beyond entertainment and sport and military and security and elite business, the idea of taking people and improving them to their full capacity, which is really, as I said, we're just at the beginning of this. What does that look like when it's put in the hands? When you take a pub boss upstairs and give him another 5 or 10%, or you give a young designer, or a young person solving global issues, the whole focus of Singularity, grand challenges, optimizing them to be the very best they can through all our tools and metrics, and individualizing the program per se, as we've seen here. To me, that's one of the staggering advantages and opportunities we have ahead of us. But I think even more importantly, and this is one I'm really focused and passionate about, is if the machine can take all that heavy lifting off us, the opportunity to become more human, explore our humanity at a higher level, to realize more about ourselves, our consciousness, those characteristics that the creativity framework is trying to peel and unpack. If we can explore that side of us and who we are, our creativity, if you like, and let that other heavy lifting be taken over there, that's a staggering opportunity and maybe even a powerful tool for each and every one of us to utilize our day-to-day lives. So that's it for me. Thank you very much, guys.